If truth is one, why do human beings constantly compare truths? This question reveals a quiet paradox at the center of modern thinking. Comparison is widely assumed to clarify accuracy and value. People ask which belief is better, which worldview is more correct, which path is closer to truth. In science, philosophy, religion, and even personal identity, comparison is treated as the primary method for reaching certainty. Yet the results are often the opposite of clarity. Comparison frequently produces conflict, confusion, and polarization rather than understanding. As information increases, certainty often decreases. Competing explanations multiply, and confidence becomes more fragile, not stronger. This contradiction forces a deeper inquiry. Does truth resist comparison because it is hidden or inaccessible? Or does it resist comparison because comparison itself is the wrong cognitive tool? According to Ibn Arabi, truth cannot be compared because comparison belongs to forms. Truth itself precedes form, measure, opposition, and rivalry. What comparison reaches is never truth itself, but only its appearances. Modern life is saturated with comparative thinking. People constantly evaluate themselves against others, beliefs against beliefs, ideologies against ideologies. Social media amplifies this tendency by turning opinion, identity, and even inner states into visible metrics. Worth is measured through contrast. Psychology explains this pattern through social comparison theory, which shows that identity is often constructed through differentiation rather than direct self-knowledge. Attention bias reinforces this dynamic by directing focus toward differences rather than underlying structures. Cognitive categorization further reduces complexity by turning truth into competing models that can be ranked and defended. The problem is structural. Comparison demands external reference points. Inner certainty becomes dependent on opposition. As a result, anxiety increases, defensiveness intensifies, and polarization becomes normalized. Truth shifts from being something encountered to something owned and protected. This is the turning point where Ibn Arabi intervenes. He reframes truth not as an object to be compared, but as a condition that comparison already presupposes. Comparison operates within truth. It does not reach it. Ibn Arabi's contribution lies not primarily in offering new doctrines, but in examining how truth is known. He was deeply concerned with epistemology, the structure of knowledge and perception, rather than simply cataloguing beliefs. His question was not only what is true, but how truth appears to consciousness. His central epistemological claim is precise. Comparison operates only within multiplicity. It requires more than one object and a shared metric. Truth, however, is not an object among objects. It does not belong to the field of multiplicity where comparison functions. Modern epistemology often treats truth as propositional and competitive. Statements must be tested against other statements. Ibn Arabi treats truth as prior to propositions altogether. Propositions describe appearances of truth, not truth itself. The key insight follows directly. When truth is compared, it has already been misunderstood. Comparison replaces recognition with evaluation. Instead of seeing, the mind ranks. Instead of understanding, it competes. Comparison is structurally dependent on duality. To compare, there must be at least two distinct entities and a common scale. This is how the cognitive system evolved to function. It allows rapid assessment of threats, resources, and usefulness. Ibn Arabi's logic is uncompromising here. Truth does not enter into duality because it is not an entity alongside other entities. It is not one option among many. Therefore, it cannot be placed on a comparative scale. Cognitive science supports this limitation. Binary categorization is a simplifying strategy used by the brain to manage complexity. Better and worse, right and wrong, safe and dangerous. These distinctions are pragmatically useful. However, they are not designed for metaphysical insight. For example, comparing tools to determine which works better is reasonable. Comparing ethical actions for social outcomes can be functional. But when comparison is applied to truth itself, it mistakes utility for reality. The insight is clear. Comparison can evaluate usefulness. It cannot access truth. Truth is not something that wins a comparison. It is what allows comparison to occur at all. A common confusion arises when people mistake perspective for truth. Because perspectives differ, truth is assumed to differ as well. This inference is rejected here. Perspectives are many. Truth is singular, but it manifests through perspectives. Modern psychology describes perception as constructivist. Experience is shaped by context, prior knowledge, and expectation. This does not mean reality is unreal. It means perception is partial. Perception is a lens, not the object seen. Consider multiple descriptions of the same event. Each account may emphasize different details without contradiction. The differences reflect perspective, not multiple realities. Similarly, comparing perspectives compares lenses, not truth. The key point is subtle but decisive. Truth is what allows perspectives to appear in the first place. It is not contained within any single viewpoint. Therefore, comparing perspectives can never yield truth itself. It only reveals the limits of perception. Comparison does more than distort understanding. It produces conflict. When truth is framed comparatively, it becomes an identity marker. Beliefs are no longer tools for understanding, but symbols of belonging. The ego attaches to partial manifestations of truth and treats them as complete. Once attachment forms, comparison becomes defensive. To question a belief feels like a threat to identity, neuroscience explains. This reaction through in-group and out-group processing. Ideological contrast activates threat responses in the brain. Defensive reasoning replaces open inquiry. Understanding gives way to protection. This explains why conflict is not driven by differences in truth itself, but by attachment to comparative frameworks. When truth is treated as something to be defended against rivals, it is no longer approached as truth at all. The insight is structural. Conflict arises not because truth differs, but because comparison transforms truth into possession. Another misconception must be addressed. Truth is often treated as something verified through accumulation, more evidence, more arguments, more comparisons. Evidence has value, but measurement applies to quantities, not realities. Cognitive science distinguishes insight, learning from incremental reasoning. Insight often appears suddenly, without linear accumulation. It is recognized immediately, even if articulated later. Examples are familiar. Understanding a logical principle, recognizing a pattern, or grasping a conceptual truth often happens in a single moment. Comparison may prepare the ground, but recognition itself is not comparative. Comparison is sequential and indirect. Recognition is immediate. Truth is recognized, not measured. When truth is present, it does not need to defeat alternatives. It simply becomes evident. A deeper paradox emerges here. Exclusive truth claims often contradict the nature of truth itself. If one form fully contained truth, no other form could express it. Yet human experience consistently shows partial insight across cultures, languages, and disciplines. This paradox is resolved by distinguishing truth from its forms. Every form expresses truth partially. No form contains it fully. Limitation belongs to form, not to truth. Unity does not mean sameness. It means that diverse expressions emerge from a single source. Comparing expressions as competitors misunderstands their relationship to what they express. Truth refuses comparison because it exceeds every frame used to measure it. What can be ranked is always already a form. Translating this insight into modern life has practical consequences. The first shift is from comparative thinking to perceptual inquiry. Instead of asking which position is superior, examine how understanding arises psychologically. Reducing comparative judgment lowers anxiety and increases cognitive flexibility. Without constant evaluation, the mind becomes more receptive. Reactivity decreases when judgment loosens. This applies to interpersonal conflict, ideological disagreement, and self-comparison. When comparison dominates, identity becomes fragile. When awareness replaces ranking, clarity increases. The guiding rule is simple but demanding. Comparison evaluates positions. Awareness reveals truth. Letting go of ranking is not passivity, it is precision. The central thesis is now clear. Truth refuses comparison because it is not an object. Its contribution lies in showing that truth precedes form, while comparison belongs to perception, not reality. When comparison ends, recognition begins. Clarity does not come from defeating alternatives, but from seeing what makes alternatives possible in the first place. What can be compared is not truth. What is true requires no comparison.